The internet offers a vast ocean of information and entertainment, yet it consistently harbors threats to our personal security. Today, I'll share a story of how an ordinary search for companionship can devolve into a nightmare, one from which waking up is far from easy. This unsettling account began in Maha, Nebraska, near the Iowa border. In 2012, Dave Kruppa, then 34, moved to the area to manage an auto repair shop he had recently inherited. Not long before this, he had separated from his wife, Amy Flora, with whom he had 2 children. For the children's well-being, the parents maintained an amicable relationship, communicated well, and saw each other often. He was looking to find a new woman for a romantic connection, so he established profiles on several dating websites at once. He was an amiable, sociable, and easygoing individual, which meant many people were interested in meeting him and exploring a relationship. Dave wasn't seeking a long-term, serious commitment at that time, but was open to enjoying pleasant times with women. One autumn afternoon in 2012, Carrie Leafarver stopped by Dave's auto shop for a routine car inspection. The woman was a 37-year-old single mother. She had a son, a talented 14-year-old computer programmer. When Dave met her gaze, he felt an instant and powerful attraction. Consequently, he invited her on a date, but she declined his offer to meet. She indicated he wasn't her type, but Dave was so drawn to her that he was determined to capture her attention. He later found her online profile and sent her a message. It wasn't immediate, but after some time, Carrie replied, and they began to communicate sporadically. Later, she visited the auto repair shop again. They had a pleasant chat, and this time Dave invited her to dinner once more, and she accepted. Carrie was a remarkably cheerful, independent, and energetic woman. She had been a top student in school, and her teachers believed she had a bright future ahead. Carrie was close to her mother and well-loved by friends and acquaintances. She always wore a smile and never gave up, no matter the circumstances. Her life situation changed significantly when she became pregnant at 22 by her boyfriend at the time. Her boyfriend was not pleased with the news and refused to be involved in raising the child. However, this did not deter Carrie. The young woman immediately decided she would keep the baby, become a single mother, and not rely on men. She had to temporarily pause her university studies and find employment. Carrie settled near her mother, Nancy, in a pleasant apartment, had her baby, completed her university degree, and eventually secured a better-paying job in the IT sector. The role of a mother came naturally to her. She and her child wanted for nothing. Until the tragic events I'm describing, her entire life was dedicated to her son, Max. She had stopped trying to build new relationships and lived solely for her child. Dave and Carrie's first date soon followed. The woman was thrilled with the evening and her interaction with him. She later confided to a friend on social media that she hadn't laughed as much as she did on that date in years. Their conversation flowed effortlessly and naturally, as if they had known each other for a long time. Therefore, Carrie was keen to continue the relationship. Dave, too, was eager to pursue a romantic involvement with Carrie, whom he liked a great deal. He was truly smitten with her, and for her, he ceased his interactions with others on dating sites. However, another woman was present in Dave's life, Shauna Elizabeth Golar, who went by Liz. She was one of the first people he had met online after his separation from his wife. The woman was 38 years old. She used the pseudonym Liz on the dating platform. Dave found her to be a sweet and cheerful person. They both had children of similar ages, and she claimed to share Dave's preference for an open relationship. Liz operated her own small business and was also a homemaker. They connected instantly and had been meeting regularly for the past 6 months, maintaining a physical relationship. Gradually, Liz began to exhibit very possessive behavior. She wanted to spend increasing amounts of time with Dave, who cherished his independence and was also seeing other women. This misunderstanding led to the breakdown of their relationship, and Dave distanced himself. But Liz continued to intrude into his life, constantly offering unsolicited advice that caused him stress. Liz was aware that he used to date various women before he met Carrie, and for each one, she was quick to express her disapproval, disparaging all of Dave's female companions. In an effort to create distance from his former girlfriend, he suggested she date other men, but she refused and, in a defiant gesture, deleted her profile from the dating site. Liz became jealous of other women, Carrie, and even his children and ex-wife, so he constantly had to remind her of her boundaries. During one of his dates with Carrie, Dave noticed missed messages and calls. It was the persistent Liz. She urgently requested access to his apartment, claiming she had forgotten something there after her last visit and demanded it in a very insistent tone. He replied that he was on a date with a woman he was interested in and couldn't let her in at that moment, but could do so later when he returned home. However, Liz started to pressure him to come immediately, insisting she needed her belongings urgently. Eventually, Dave relented. He and Carrie went to Dave's residence late that afternoon. They had barely stepped inside when Liz arrived almost instantly and began pounding on the door. She was yelling loudly, demanding to be let in, and she was clearly enraged. Naturally, this situation ruined the romantic atmosphere. But the understanding Carrie suggested Dave resolve the issue with the woman and then go to her place, where they wouldn't be disturbed. Dave did just that. He opened the door, handed Liz her things, and they left the house. The women's eyes met for a fleeting second as they departed, a moment that would irrevocably alter their fates. The new couple headed to Carrie's home. The journey to her place in Macedonia, Iowa, took about an hour. The following morning, Carrie told Dave she was content with their current relationship arrangement. She didn't require a serious commitment, marriage, or more children. He, in turn, admitted he couldn't have children. Like him, Carrie only desired enjoyable companionship. This brought them even closer, as both shared similar preferences and perspectives on relationships between men and women. This also significantly hastened the development of their connection. They had a complete mutual understanding. Dave found Carrie exceptionally attractive, intelligent, and charming. For the subsequent 2 weeks, they saw each other every day. Carrie worked just a few blocks from his house and auto shop, even though she resided in a neighboring town in another state, so it was convenient for her to drop by during the day for lunch or to spend time with Dave. She frequently stayed overnight at his place. Carrie held a well-paying job. She occupied a key position at a large IT company. Carrie dedicated most of her time to her work and her son, with only a small portion reserved for leisure. All of this aligned perfectly with Dave's life plans, although Dave started to consider whether he should rethink his firm rule and perhaps move in with Carrie. In early November, while Carrie was staying with Dave, she received several friend requests on social media from individuals she didn't recognize. The woman observed that one of the men was from her hometown of Macedonia. She sent him a message asking, "Do I know you?" but never got a response. The entire incident seemed peculiar to her, and she mentioned it to Dave, but they didn't give the matter much importance. On November 13th, 2012, Dave woke up early and found his companion, Carrie, working on her laptop, making final adjustments to a new project. She was scheduled to present it to her management that same day. Dave kissed his lover goodbye and departed. They planned to meet again that evening. While at work, he received a message from Carrie asking if he wanted to move in with her. This was a complete shock to Dave because just days earlier, they had discussed the matter and concluded they weren't going to live as a family, but simply wished to spend time together occasionally. He found it odd, even though he had contemplated it himself, but he disliked being pressured. So, Dave politely declined the offer, reminding her that it had already been discussed and they had decided to keep things as they were for the time being. In response, the person he was conversing with unleashed a torrent of profanities at him. She was, judging by the texts, utterly furious and hateful. There were hysterical threats, and it appeared that the relationship with the woman of his dreams had abruptly ended. Dave didn't recognize his lover in these messages and was stunned by her remarks. He completely cut off contact with her and returned home after work. None of Carrie's belongings were in his house anymore. It seemed she had accepted the breakup and had retrieved all her items. A few days later, police officers arrived at his auto repair shop. The law enforcement officials informed the owner that his girlfriend, Carrie Farver, was missing. As it turned out, he was the last person to have seen her alive that morning when he kissed her goodbye. She never arrived at work. Since then, no one from her circle had been able to contact the woman. Dave explained he was unaware of what had happened to her and shared their final correspondence with the investigators. He clarified that on that day, Carrie had communicated with him very aggressively and rudely, in a manner entirely uncharacteristic of her. He had become upset and ended contact with her, and afterward, he worried about it and wondered if Carrie, who always communicated politely, could genuinely have written such messages. Detectives began speaking with the missing person's loved ones and were able to piece together some of the events of that day. On the morning of November 13th, 2012, Dave left the house, kissing Carrie goodbye, and she was preparing to go to work. Later, Carrie's mother received unsettling messages from her daughter, in which she confessed to breaking up with her boyfriend and, as a result, ending up in a mental hospital due to a nervous breakdown. This message greatly frightened her mother, causing her to panic, but she couldn't locate her daughter in any clinic. Meanwhile, Carrie did not show up for work on her important day when she was set to present a new project. This seemed quite alarming. Later, her employer received a message stating that Carrie had secured a new position in Kansas and would no longer be working for him. This message also surprised the missing woman's bosses because she valued her job immensely. And her son, Max, also received a message from Carrie. She wrote that she was planning to attend her stepbrother's wedding. The issue was that the wedding had already occurred without her. All these pieces of information troubled the woman's relatives, colleagues, and friends. The reports contradicted one another and couldn't possibly all be true. No one believed that Carrie would abandon her son and relocate to another state merely because of her job. It appeared that Carrie was either hiding something from everyone or she was in trouble. So, after consulting among themselves, the relatives filed a police report concerning the woman's disappearance. Dave was completely bewildered by the unfolding events and couldn't believe what was happening. He gave police officers full access to inspect his vehicle and his cell phone. He actively cooperated with the investigation and tried to assist in the search for his beloved. Dave informed law enforcement officials that he had been in a relationship with a missing woman for only a few weeks, but during that time, they had become very close. Carrie was always friendly and calm, but after her disappearance, which he wasn't aware of at the time, he was inundated with aggressive messages containing insults and threats on social networks. The police believed Dave, who was cooperating with them voluntarily. He was evidently very upset about her disappearance and successfully passed a polygraph test. He genuinely had no reason to harm his lover. Then, the detectives shared some interesting information about her. When Carrie was just over 20 years old, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, the officers stated. She could have experienced similar psychotic episodes if she wasn't taking her medication. That could explain the strange, aggressive messages. Detectives explained to the concerned man that Carrie might have lost control if she ran out of her pills while at his place, and the woman could have had a seizure. Once she was found, she would resume her medication, and all the problems she had been experiencing would cease. This reassured Dave, and he assured the police he would provide them with any information if the missing person made contact again. However, all this was merely the beginning of the madness that awaited him. Afterward, he began receiving regular, nasty messages with threats and insult from anonymous social media accounts. The correspondence actively insulted the women in Dave's life, especially his acquaintance Liz. The number of such messages per day reached up to 60. The number of accounts and messaging apps through which he was contacted steadily increased. Everyone who knew him began receiving the same ominous messages. All this frightened Dave, who reported the threats to the police. One of the women Dave had dated before meeting Carrie told the police she too had experienced similar problems. After her first date with him, she was literally bombarded with threats, promising to harm her children if she ever met him again, and the woman ceased all communication with Dave. From there, things deteriorated further. All of Dave's acquaintances started receiving messages claiming he was a scoundrel who physically abused women. This information circulated virtually everywhere and was also actively spread on dating sites. Consequently, the abuser's actions led to Dave being flooded with insulting messages, including from people he didn't even know. He had to defend himself to everyone and explain that he had never laid a hand on women, and all these messages were falsehoods, unsupported by any evidence. Dave's life became a living hell after that. Everyone avoided him and his workshop, and many people despised him. At that point, the missing woman had been out of contact for more than 3 weeks, and police had been unable to track her movements or trace her cell phone and car. Bank card transactions also yielded no leads. There was every reason to believe she was deceased. It was crucial to find her body and determine what had happened, as the missing person's relatives needed answers. Dave continued to be terrorized, so he was forced to contact the police again. However, law enforcement officers were actively engaged with the case of his girlfriend's disappearance. They lacked the resources to assist him. Therefore, they showed no interest in the story about the suspicious text messages. In January 2013, Dave accidentally discovered the Ford Explorer car that belonged to Carrie in a parking lot near an apartment building, but it was empty. The man immediately notified the police, after which officers arrived to inspect the vehicle. The car had a scratch on one side, but there were no fingerprints on the exterior of the car or the steering wheel. Strangely, there were no fingerprints on the steering wheel at all, not even Carrie's, as if someone had deliberately erased them. They did, however, find a single fingerprint on a container of mints that was in the car. But when they ran the print against a national database, they didn't get a match. It didn't belong to Carrie either. The car was very clean except for a small pink stain on the passenger seat that resembled a spilled strawberry dessert. After the inspection, the car was returned to Carrie's parents, who later sold it. Meanwhile, the threats against Dave had begun to take on a sinister quality. He was often sent pictures of his windows with captions stating that the author had a spare key, would soon break into the house, and a knife would pierce his heart. They also sent pictures of his children accompanied by death threats. Later, the intruder began threatening him with violence against his acquaintance Liz. One day, he was sent a picture of a woman who looked very much like Liz, tied up in the trunk of a car. Dave panicked and called her to make sure she was okay. Liz was at home at the time. In moments like these, he tried to joke about it, thinking it was all just a bad prank. He waited for it all to end like a terrible dream. This troubling situation gradually brought him closer to Liz, who was also being targeted by an intruder blaming her for the breakup of Dave and Carrie's relationship. The police were also considering her a suspect in Carrie's disappearance. They began to communicate more frequently, sharing their worries and anxieties. Often, Dave and Liz would be watching a movie together when both their phones received threatening and abusive messages almost simultaneously. After receiving several menacing photos of himself and his children, Dave was again compelled to contact the police. In response to his report about online threats and harassment, the investigators merely gestured helplessly. It was evident that no one was going to shift focus and address his problem. Then, Dave submitted an application to the Special Omaha unit that handled such cases, but there was only one specialized officer in this police department, who at that time was juggling 94 cases at once and was physically incapable of reacting and assisting Dave in any way. Desperate, Dave literally had no alternative but to accept what was happening and continue living with it. He began to suspect that Carrie was alive, had escaped while experiencing mental health issues, and was now terrorizing him and others, but there was no confirmation of this. Carrie's father passed away, and her family became increasingly concerned when she missed the funeral. Instead, they received text messages of apology from her number, but no one had heard her voice in months. Carrie's family realized that something was seriously wrong, and she was not the one sending these messages. In the spring of 2013, a certain man called Carrie's mother and identified himself as Dave Kruppa. He told the distressed mother that Carrie had called him, saying she was in a homeless shelter in Omaha and wanted to be picked up. Carrie's excited parents reported it to the police, and together they went to the shelter, where it was discovered that Carrie was not there and never had been. It was later determined that the caller was not Dave Kruppa, and the incident was just a cruel prank. Through the court, Carrie's parents obtained custody of her son, who had been living with them all along. Meanwhile, Dave and Liz's relationship became a true roller coaster. For months, they were on again, off again. Liz became increasingly obsessive and kept him on edge. Dave began to notice that as soon as he was about to break up with her, the threatening text messages, allegedly from Carrie, would start arriving. He thought this was a strange coincidence, but assumed someone was following them. They eventually broke up for good in August 2013 due to Dave's unwillingness to pursue a serious relationship with Liz. Soon, Liz's garage was broken into and vandalized, with offensive messages about the homeowner left on it. A few days later, Dave learned that Liz's rented house was on fire. The fire was not severe, so rescuers managed to save the house, but the premises required repairs. In addition, animals, 2 dogs, a cat, and a snake that lived with the family, perished in the fire, so she and her 2 children went to live with relatives for a while. Liz claimed to the police that the arson was committed by Carrie, who had been constantly threatening her and had now moved from threats to action. At this point, the stalker terrorizing Dave, purportedly on Carrie's behalf, effectively pleaded guilty to the garage robbery and fire through messages. Dave then received a strange message signed from Carrie. In it, the author of the message claimed to be pregnant with Dave's child. But Dave knew this was a lie because he had undergone a vasectomy a few years earlier and couldn't have children. He also knew that Carrie had undergone a hysterectomy, which made it impossible for her to get pregnant even if she wanted to. This message made him seriously doubt that Carrie was actually writing to him. And 2 months later, a bright orange sign at his auto shop declared that Dave was a woman beater. In January 2014, a longtime male friend came to visit him. At night, a few hours after the pair went to bed, a brick was thrown through the bathroom window. During this period, the nervous tension experienced by the man being stalked reached a critical point. He realized the situation was out of control and becoming dangerous. Given the inaction of the police, Dave decided to make a drastic change. He moved to another house and found a new job. He also changed his phone number and all contact information and purchased a firearm for protection. Thus, he disappeared from all radars for a considerable period, not communicating with anyone. But in time, his main weakness resurfaced. He registered on a dating site again, albeit under a different name, and arranged a date with a new woman. The woman never showed up. Instead, he received a threatening message from Carrie. It turned out the woman from the site had also received a similar message, which is why she didn't attend the date due to the threats. Liz also received an angry message. It was an email from someone named Amy Flora, which was the name of Dave's ex-spouse. Liz then speculated that it was his ex-wife who might be the stalker, posing as the missing person to terrorize the man and all his loved ones for over 3 years. Since Liz couldn't contact Dave in any way, she went to the police with this information, filing a stalking report. The theory looked quite implausible. Amy, in fact, had sufficient reason to harbor resentment against her ex-husband over the divorce. During the same period, Dave's gun had vanished from his house without a trace, which meant someone was breaking into his home, and he could be in potential danger. The man reported it to the police, as the situation was once again spiraling out of control. After all these events, the police finally decided to take a closer look at the stalking situation. Naturally, they were primarily interested in the connection to the missing Carrie. A re-interview of Dave was conducted, which showed that he was indeed not involved in her disappearance. Also, after gathering more information, the investigators doubted that the missing woman had threatened her boyfriend and other people. They couldn't understand why someone who dated Dave for about 2 weeks would spend years pursuing him and all the women in his circle, giving up her entire life, her family, her home, her successful job, for him. It just didn't make any sense. It was as if someone had simply stolen her identity and was using it to stalk him. On December 5th, 2015, Liz Golar, a former acquaintance of the stalked Dave, called 911. She reported that she was attacked while walking late at night on the trail home through the park. The woman saw a shadow appear in the dark. Then she was attacked from behind and asked if she liked Dave, after which a gunshot rang out. The victim claimed she was able to get a good look at the perpetrator. The attacker was a woman who looked like Amy Flora, Dave's ex-wife. She allegedly shot her victim in the leg before fleeing into the darkness of the night. Fortunately, Liz only suffered a minor injury and was sent to the hospital. The police officers decided to speak with Amy and arrived at her home. Details needed to be ascertained to make a specific charge against the woman, and it had to be confirmed that she was indeed the shooter. But Amy denied everything. During the conversation, police learned that she too was subjected to numerous threats from an unknown woman. According to Amy, she had recently reconnected with her ex-husband Dave and was subsequently bombarded with a barrage of aggressive messages threatening her to stop communicating with him. The woman allowed her home to be inspected. Nothing suspicious could be found. In addition, Amy had a solid alibi for the time of the attack on Liz. Detectives began to verify this information. Her alibi, as well as the threatening letters she received, were confirmed, and Amy was removed from the list of suspects. But Liz continued to insist that it was Amy who had attacked her. She could not explain how she had managed to see the shooter's face so clearly in the dark, in a state of fright. No one believed her account. As proof of her words, Liz brought a printed message from Amy confessing to the attack, which she claimed had been emailed to her. The confession contained very detailed information about Carrie's abduction on the morning of November 13th, 2012. Carrie had logged on to her social media page at around 6:45 a.m. The next time she logged in was 3 hours later to remove Dave from her friends. According to Amy's confession, that's when she kidnapped Carrie. The author of the letter accurately described Carrie's tattoos, including one not mentioned in the missing persons flyer. The letter reported that Carrie had been stabbed in her abdomen or chest and then burned beyond recognition and dumped in a dumpster. Details included information about Carrie's car and home that had not been previously publicized. This led police to believe that the letter writer had actually seen her body and Carrie had indeed been murdered over 3 years ago, but they didn't believe Amy had done it, much less would have written the confession letter herself and signed it with her name. The whole thing looked like an amateurish setup. Investigators were suspicious of Liz Golar, who provided this email from Amy. A check of Liz's phone revealed information she had deleted. They found that Liz was using an app that encrypted her location, making it difficult to track where the messages were sent from. Another app she used was designed to delay sending messages, which could explain how she could have received a message purportedly from Carrie while in Dave's presence. The missing person's mother, Nancy, intervened in the investigation. She suspected that the messages to relatives sent by Carrie before her disappearance had been written by another person. This was indicated by grammatical errors and an uncharacteristic writing style for Carrie, who was always polite and very literate. Among the useful information police were able to get from Nancy was a check. It was written for the transportation of her daughter's furniture, which Carrie allegedly sold remotely after she disappeared. The check was made out to Shauna Liz Golar. It also emerged that Carrie's supervisor had received a letter of resignation. In it, Carrie indicated that a friend of hers was coming to apply for her position, and that friend she designated as Shauna Golar. Liz actually applied to the company for Carrie's position shortly thereafter, but she did not meet even the minimum hiring requirements for such a role and was rejected. The case was becoming increasingly convoluted, and it was unclear what was truly happening. But one thing was certain. Carrie didn't consider Liz a friend to vouch for her and offer her a job, nor would she trust her with safe deposit boxes and money. There was clearly something deeply wrong here. It turns out that Liz had literally lost her mind over Dave. She set fire to the rental house she lived in, damaged her car and garage, and her animals died in the fire. The woman even shot herself, all to terrorize Dave, her secret obsession for years. It was hard to believe, but the investigators kept working on the case to uncover the truth. When Dave found out about the checks, he was amazed at how duplicitous Liz was because she had managed to hide it all for so long. She had sent over 15,000 messages in 3 years. All of this activity took 50 to 70 hours a week, akin to a full-time job. She used a timer to delay sending messages so she could always have an alibi. All of this she did simply out of possessive feelings she had for the man she was stalking. She didn't want to share Dave with other women and try to win him back at all costs, which she almost succeeded in doing. Dave thought about it and concluded that Liz might indeed be behind the harassment, because when they were together, they received messages much less frequently which was strange. But as soon as they broke up, the flood of messages intensified significantly, and it couldn't be easily explained. However, the police still had to prove all of this. The detectives began cautiously questioning Liz as soon as she was released from the hospital after the gunshot wound. It was imperative to get any information that would lead the investigation to Carrie. During the interrogation, the woman was highly agitated. She argued very aggressively that Amy Flora should be imprisoned because she was clearly a danger to society. Liz brought in new letters, supposedly from Amy, in which Amy kept confessing to Carrie's murder and revealing all the details, such as that Carrie had been killed in her own car on the passenger side. However, the detectives knew this wasn't true and Amy had nothing to do with it. The cops told her that Amy was now with her ex-husband to test Liz's reaction. This had the expected effect. The woman began to lose control of herself and was furious. The police officers continued to play along and informed her that something substantial was needed to press charges against Amy. They tried to link Amy to Carrie's disappearance, which Liz accused her of. The interrogated woman began to share more and more details of the crime. But how could she know them? Police officers were able to locate Carrie's car that her parents had sold and obtain permission from the new owners to inspect it. During the inspection, the seat covers were removed, and because of this, a large blood stain was found on the seat, as well as smaller stains underneath the seats. Analysis revealed that the DNA belonged to Carrie, who had been missing for 3 years. There were also traces of DNA belonging to Liz, who should not have been in the missing person's car. All this raised even more suspicions against her. Investigators later found thousands of photos on the suspect's computer. Most of them were selfies, but one of them showed a leg with signs of decomposition. Police were able to identify it from tattoos that were identical to the ones Carrie had. During a lengthy investigation, they determined that the IP address from which the emails containing Amy's confessions, as well as the threats from Carrie, were sent belonged to the same person, a man named Garrett. Garrett was living with a woman he had considered his partner for many years, Shauna Golar. It turned out that after the fire, Shauna and her children had moved in with him, and the man had taken care of them. He had no idea that his supposed loved one was weaving a complex web of intrigue and lies around the story of Carrie's disappearance. Police officers were unable to find anything of interest when they searched Garrett's home, but a check of her former residence yielded new evidence. Police officers found several cell phones and electronics, including a camera that belonged to Carrie. It was proven that one of the cell phones found was used to call Carrie's mother on the day Dave claimed she was at a homeless shelter. It had a voice changer app installed on it. Detectives finally matched the fingerprints found on the pack of mints in Carrie's car to Liz's fingerprints, and they were a match. The cynicism with which the perpetrator acted was off the charts, even by the standards of the criminal world. For reasons completely unknown, she cruelly gave hope to the mother and son of the missing person with her messages. And for a while, they believed that Carrie was alive, unwell, and in need of help. Things went so far that the missing woman's son, Max, 3 years after his mother's tragic disappearance, texted the number from which he last received a message from her. The teen wrote, "If it's really you, come back. I want you to be with me at prom." Based on all of this evidence, Liz was arrested in December 2016 and charged with first-degree murder, concealing evidence, and a body, and arson. Her defense team opted for a bench trial, where her guilt would be decided by a judge rather than a jury. The prosecution believed the defendant stabbed Carrie to death in November 2012 in the victim's own car. Liz allegedly accosted her as Carrie left Dave's house and was on her way to her car. At that moment, Liz attacked her. The prosecution presented all the evidence pointing to Liz as corroboration, but the defense disagreed. The defense attorney argued that the fingerprints on the mint package could have been left earlier when the women crossed paths near Dave's house, and Carrie later brought the package into the car. However, other evidence could not be disputed. IP address and cell phone data indicated that she was the one who had been carrying on the correspondences, providing all the details of the murder. A bloodstain was found on and under the front passenger seat. But if Liz didn't kill her, how could she know that the murder took place in this spot? Also, how could she have known the other details? Furthermore, the defendant could not explain how a photo of the dead woman's leg, which was recognized by the tattoo, ended up on her phone. Another shocking story involving her came to light at the trial. Liz once had a young son named Cody. Cody's father, who had a mental disability, adored his son. When the boy was found unconscious, it was determined that he died from shaken baby syndrome. Cody's father confessed to the crime and was sent to prison, despite the fact that his family truly believed that Liz had killed the child herself and had simply manipulated the man into believing he did it, which is why he confessed. It also emerged that the stalking of Dave was not the only instance of stalking by Liz. Once, the father of Liz's other child broke off their relationship, and she pursued his new girlfriend. Liz didn't stop, even when they married and the couple had a child together. Even after they divorced, Liz still stalked the woman, even though the perceived threat had been eliminated. Eventually, the targeted woman had to move away to live in peace. Ultimately, on August 15, 2017, Liz Golar was found guilty on all counts. However, she did not plead guilty to any of the charges, including arson. She showed no signs of remorse. In fact, the defendant attempted to evoke compassion and appeal to the best of humanity. Her attorney asked the court for a sentence of no more than 30 years, with parole eligibility after 15 years. The prosecutor's office noted at trial that Liz possessed no signs of humanity and therefore did not deserve leniency. Liz was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus an additional 20 years for setting the house on fire. She continues to deny her guilt and is trying to challenge the verdict, stating that she will not stop fighting and will ensure that the true perpetrator, who she claims is still walking free, is put behind bars. Carrie's family was never able to retrieve her body. It could not be located. Most of all, her friends and family want to find her remains to cremate and scatter her ashes in the wind, as she herself wished. If you found this account compelling, please subscribe to the channel, support this video with a like, and let's discuss this story in the comments. I also recommend watching these related videos. Thank you all, and goodbye for now.